Retailers have been cheering the holiday sales figures so far this season. But my next guest says in the long run, the balance of power has already shifted from the seller to the shopper. Are we headed for a world where only the strongest brands survive? Here with some answers, Michael Dart, co-author of The New Rules of Retail. He's also head of private equity at Kurt Solomon Associates. Michael, good to have you with us on Bloomberg.
Thanks very much for having me.
First question I got to ask, why write another book on retailing? We've got a lot of books on retailing. What prompted you to feel that you had something to say?
Well, Robin Lewis and myself, my co-author Robin, had spent a lot of time trying to figure out the answer to this question. Why was it that some retailers were doing so well and others seemed to be failing? Why, for example, had Circuit City as a scale retailer basically disappeared and Best Buy was succeeding? Why was it that Linens and Things had disappeared but Bed Bath & Beyond was doing well? Why had Albertsons basically fragmented, had to sell itself off, but Trader Joe's has a line of cars that are outside trying to get in when there's so many other supermarkets you could go to? So we wanted to answer that question, and we wanted to place it into a context which we thought would, if you like, abstract off the specific issues of those companies.
So then you could apply it in more general terms.
In general terms. And so we wanted to put it into a social context, an economic context, and ultimately, which is where you're going, is in the mind of the consumer and understanding how the consumer's psyche and their psychology has changed, given that they have now, we believe, just so much power in the marketplace.
So what are some of the sort of telltale signs of success from the seller's point of view?
Right. The retailers that are doing really well are almost creating a phenomenally addictive experience with their consumer. Now, there's a lot of work that's been done by behavioral economists and neuroscientists that is picking up the way our brains work and the way in which consumers respond to what retailers are doing. So, for example, you go to a treasure hunt at Costco. There's an anticipation of finding something really exciting and fun there. And what scientists have found is that actually gets dopamine surging in the brain, which is a chemical associated with happiness, satisfaction,
you
euphoria.
Feel good shopping.
You feel really good. And those retailers who create that addictive experience are the ones who are winning. Now, the key ingredient here is you can't do that unless you do two other things really well. Number one, you've got to have preemptive distribution. You've got to get in front of the consumer more often, more frequently with your stuff. But you can't do that unless you control the value chain. And that's where the hypothesis that we have in the book, I think, gets real power and real meat. Those companies that control the value chain, that are exerting control not only from the creation of the product, but all the way to the point of customer experience, are the ones that are dominating. And if you think about it, let's take a company like Apple. More people visited Apple stores this year because of the experience inside those stores than went to Disneyland or Disney World globally.
That value chain that you speak of seems to also highlight one of the big deficiencies in the retail world, which is that many of the people, the customer service representatives, that are actually facing the potential shopper are the ones who have the least training, the least impetus to actually make a sale, and are least educated about the products and services that they're offering. Why do companies always seem to spend, not all of them, but they spend the least amount of time and money and attention at the very point of customer contact?
It's interesting because the best examples and the winners that we identify in this book are those that actually are investing in that experience. Correct. And doing a good job. And many retailers have found themselves caught a little bit in a profit trap about where do they invest, particularly in tough times, and how do they make sure they hit the bottom line. But the ones that have held the course, continue to invest in that experience, both in terms of drawing in consumers with interesting new merchandise, flowing it in at times that's unexpected. So you always go back to those stores because you're going to find something interesting, but also have the personnel who can deliver are the ones who are actually doing well.
Can you give us some insight into how is Gilt Group delivering? Because I know my producer, Travis Altman, he happens to favor a little bit of Gilt Group every now and again, and I'm curious, what did you learn in the book?
Well, Gilt Group does something really interesting. As I said to you, that dopamine actually in the brain, this euphoric kick comes in actually anticipation of finding something. It's one of the reasons why at Christmas and gift-giving times, people actually get more excited about opening the present quite often than they actually get when they get it, and they move to the next parcel. And what Gilt Group does really well is has these spot auctions where for a limited time you can actually go in, or buys for a limited time, you go in, buy something, but if you don't go in there at that specific time, you're going to miss it. So they found that there's a whole cadre of consumers who are addicted to that experience. So at a lunchtime, they're literally logging in to find out what's the exclusive, tantalizing new thing that's on sale. And that's driving a lot of their business. And you see that across the spectrum. It's the business model that's delivering this satisfaction to the consumer in a way that's almost slightly unpredictable, and the consumer themselves wouldn't necessarily identify as being the key driver for why they go there.
Sounds like they're making that emotional connection. I want to
really
thank you very much, Michael Dart, the author of The New Rules of Retail, Dopamine. That explains a lot.